Welcome back to the recap episode of AyyScare Plays Front Office Football 8, Season 2. In case you missed the final episode, we had a down year. We went 6-10, didn't make playoffs, but I feel like the overall 20 seasons went alright. We didn't win a bowl, but we made a couple of deep playoff runs, and overall, I feel like we improved the team from where it was when we took it over. So, let's go ahead and take a look a little bit at our team history. So, our team overall went through basically two quarterbacks through our time together. We went through Bart Hines, and then about halfway through, we had a couple of down years and then ended up switching to Holmberg. Both quarterbacks gave us decent playoff runs. We're going to be talking more about that here in a little bit. In terms of running backs, we mainly went with Herb Carpenter, and then in the more recent episodes, Daniels. In terms of quarterback or wide receivers, Dabney and Jalen were the two that really stood out. And then in terms of defense, Luther Hall and Wayne Lee were kind of our two big name defenders that you'll probably recognize. Pasco was also a big one. Alexis Brady was a big one. But overall, we had a number of big players that we saw throughout the 20 seasons or the 20 episodes. In our time here, I think that we can go to here. Our first episode together was season 2069 until now. And you can see here, a lot of this is within, 10 wins of one another. But we were basically middle of the pack. Maybe a little bit towards the weaker end, but basically middle of the pack. If we go to the team's history before we took them over, you see they were the third worst team in the league. So it's not like we flipped this thing on its head. We definitely improved from what they were dealing with. And I think that overall we set the team up for, whoever's going to be taking over the team from here. I think they're in a position where they can take this team into playoffs some more. If we go here, this is always an interesting little chart to look at. I think based on the bars, I know we started at 4-10. Yeah, so this right here was our first season. And you can see we kind of had a upswing here as Bart Hines was our main guy. Then we had a couple of down years as we lost him. And then here's where Holmberg took over for us as QB. And you can see basically these 3 years were basically the three best years of the franchise, basically. There was one outlier down here. But we definitely had a couple of shots. We made it to the bowl once and conference game, I guess 3 times. We won it once and we lost it twice. So, from there, we're going to hop in. If you watched the recap episode that I did for the very first season, this will look familiar. What I want to specify before jumping into the spreadsheet, though, is the ratings on here are 100% my opinion. They are not based on a actual scale. General scale that I'm using is if I'm using a first round pick, I'm expecting that player to be a great player for 5+ years, starting caliber, good player. That's kind of what I'm expecting from a first round pick. Second to fourth round picks are more going to be hey, hopefully you're a starter for us. Hopefully we get a couple of good years out of you. And then rounds 5 through 7 are kind of the flyer rounds where it's hey, hopefully you start for us. Maybe you're a good backup, something like that. But basically, as long as you touch the field for a couple of games and things like that, I'm kind of happy. So that's kind of where you'll see the ABC ratings that I give will kind of fluctuate. So let's go ahead and hop in. First year together. First year together was honestly probably one of our best drafts. This is the draft where we got Bart Hines at pick 3 overall. And he was our full-time starter for 6 seasons. Of those 6 seasons, we made playoffs 4 out of 6 seasons. After he left us, he signed with Green Bay. There, he ended up winning league MVP. And the year that he won league MVP, he won the Super Bowl. And then, since then, he played 4 seasons as a backup, more in like a kind of, I guess, not coaching, but kind of like that backup veteran role. The big thing with him that I don't know how much it kind of like stunted what his abilities were. This same year, we also drafted Dion Knotts, who ended up being our like basically starting quarterback for at least one full season. And he played overall decently. There was some questioning in my mind if we should stick with him and try to get rid of Bart Hines. But Dion Knotts, after leaving us, played 2 seasons as a backup and then left the league. So even though he looked like a semi-decent option, happy we did not follow him. And we stuck with Bart Hines for as long as we did, because even though Bart Hines did not get us a ring, he got us into playoffs 4 years, and he's very much a proven good quarterback in the league. He didn't have the great touchdown to interception ratio, which is the main reason we ended up getting rid of him, but he was good enough to win it all one year. Outside of them, Brandon Rund ended up being a very successful player. Not so much for us, but after we traded him away, he ended up playing a couple of very, very good seasons. Outside of those 3, there really isn't much to talk about here. I'm not going to talk about every single player, and you're more than welcome to kind of read my notes on each one. After that, in our second season, we also had a really good draft. In this draft, we drafted Riley Hines, who was our starting left tackle for 9 seasons, and overall was a great tackle. Got first team overall one year, and landed in the record books for a lot of the Denver blocking statistics. This was also the year that we got Wayne Lee. Wayne Lee played for us for 12 seasons. Absolutely fantastic safety, and really couldn't complain. Outside of that, 2 names that might not ring a bell at this point, Dustin West and Marshall. I'm not exactly sure how you say that. So we're just going to say Dustin and Marshall. These guys both played, very decently for us. Dustin West went on to play significantly after us. He won a ring with Chicago, and, he never lived up to the best season that he had for us, but he was a very valid starter, especially for a 4th-round pick. Third season together was definitely one of our meh drafts. Biggest draft pick was our 9th overall pick in right guard Covington. He was a starting guard for us for about half of our time together. So overall, can't really complain there. He didn't, break any records or get into the Denver record books or anything like that, but he was a very, very viable starter for us. We also got Arnold Walton, who was a cornerback for us. Again, didn't do anything too crazy for us, but he was a starter for us for 6 seasons. He played decently. Here's where we ran into a big bunch of bad picks. These 3, all horrible picks. But we wrapped it up with a couple of good ones. First, running back here, Mel, he played decently for us, and then went on to play another 2 seasons. Never really was a RB1. He was more of kind of like an RB2 throughout his career. But, for a 5th round pick, that's perfectly fine. And then the 7th round pick was an inside linebacker who really didn't do anything for us. But after his rookie deal, he went on and played very decently for a couple of other teams. So rated him a C. What would this be? This would be our 4th year together. 4th year together, there were 2 big picks, but I don't know if at this point you'll recognize the names. 2nd round, first pick, we went Atkins, who was a cornerback. The cornerback for us, he really was like a part-time starter for us in terms of cornerback. But the thing that I didn't really know until I was looking at these stats is that he was actually one of the best special teams players to ever play. So he holds Denver's record for most punt return yards and touchdowns. Once we got rid of him, he went and played a couple additional seasons and ended up with top all-time punt return yards and 2nd top all-time punt return touchdowns. So for a 2nd round pick, that is an awesome stat line. We then also had Jesse here, Jesse Devine, I think is how I was saying it. And he, again, never was like superstar of the team, but he played very well for us for 5 seasons as our starting center. He then went on and played 5 other starting seasons for other teams. Colton Hansen played really well for us. He played 5 years as our starting nose tackle. After us, he didn't go on to do too much, but for a late 3rd round pick, he played very solidly. Mike Knight is another name that is probably not going to ring a bell, mainly because he was a backup for Bart Hines, really didn't do anything for us. We let him hit free agency after 5 seasons. He went on to be a full-time starter for Buffalo, and he had a couple of very good starting seasons. He never won a ring or anything like that, but from doing nothing for us to going and being a starter somewhere for multiple seasons, very, very decent player. And then here, the other pick worth mentioning was Mackenzie. He was a kicker. Now, the one thing to note here is that I did use a 5th round pick on him, which makes it a little bit less, great. He was a very decent kicker for us, but using a kicker using a 5th round pick for a kicker is a little bit of a stretch, but he is worth mentioning here. Next season. This is where a bunch of players that are really not worth mentioning. Malcolm Picton was a player that I really hoped was going to step in and be a really good wide receiver for us, and he just never panned out, even after us. He played 8 more seasons after playing for us and really never did well. His best season, 507 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. The one player, though, that is worth mentioning, because he's a player that we had to build around for a couple of episodes because his personality didn't really fly with others on the team, was Donnie Pasco. And he really is one of the best players that we've probably ever drafted. He was 2 times first team outside linebacker and once second team. He won Defensive Player of the Year in his 6th season. And he played 11 seasons for us and went on to play 3 additional ones. Easily one of the best players that we ever drafted. Next season, main player that needs commenting here, Jalen. Now, Jalen never, how do I word this? He never really lived up to what I wanted out of a 1st round wide receiver. He never made Pro Bowl. Even though here I have best season, he did have this season with almost 1,200 yards, give or take. he really never got close to this again. I think that this might have been his only season with over 1,000 yards. That being said, he was a rock on our team basically the entire time we played this season. He played for us for 13 seasons. We drafted him. He retired with us. So he does get an A in my book just because he was kind of that cornerstone. Yeah, he may not have been the wide receiver one that was over the top incredible, but he was good enough that I'm giving him an A. Next episode, there was a horrible draft. And when I say horrible, I mean, I gave it a C here. Realistically, this is probably, I'm actually going to edit this live down to a D. This was really just a horrible, horrible draft. The first round pick that we got really never did much, and we let him go after his rookie deal. He went on to have a couple of decent seasons, but really never lived up to a first round pick worthy pick. And then outside of that, like, you can just look down the list here, like Jonathan Shea, he was our fullback, and he was actually a really good fullback. But in this game and in real life, fullbacks are more of like a utility position. So you're not seeing them go for like 1,000 yards. You're not seeing them go for like, insane amount of receiving yards or anything like that. Like, they're kind of there to help with your run game. They're there to every now and then catch a pass, every now and then take a handoff. But I mean, he was a great fullback, but the fact that that was really the only thing worthwhile that we got out of this draft means it was a really, really bad draft. All right, next episode. This episode, once again, was not the best of drafts. The really only worthwhile player that we got here was Herb Carpenter. And if you watched kind of those middle episodes, he played for us for 5.5 episodes. He really was a very decent running back. Was he worth the 16th overall pick? Maybe not, but he was not a pick that I regret looking back on it. He, as a reminder, our coaching staff cut him midway through the 6th season together. So he went on, played another 4 seasons as an RB2 after us. So overall, really a name that you will recognize if you watched the season in full. The other name in here that I am going to mention is Bo here. Now, he was a 2nd round pick for us. He really did nothing for us, and we ended up lumping him into a trade deal after his 2nd season. He actually went on to start for a number of seasons across different teams, and he's actually still in the league as of us wrapping it up 12 episodes later. So, again, was he a top tackle? No, but he's a very viable starter that saw a long time in the league. Next episode together. Here we had a couple of actually really good picks. Sebastian Slaughter is a name that you will definitely recognize if you've followed along. He played with us for 10 seasons. Very, very good safety. Can't complain. I will say again, 9th overall pick, maybe a little bit disappointing, but safety is a position that seems to be a little bit hard to get in this game. So I'm not disappointed with the overall pick. The other pick here that is a name that may not be recognizable because, again, it's not a name that we're looking at stats on a regular basis. Reginald here, he was our 2nd round pick center. He's actually one of the best centers to ever play. He started for us for 12 seasons. He has Denver's record for pancake blocks. He's 2nd in key run blocks, 2nd in key run opportunities. And he is actually still with the team. So, like, those two combined, exceptionally good picks. The other name in here that you will probably not recognize is Butch Evans. For us, he was a backup, and after 4 seasons, we ended up trading him. He went on to start for Jacksonville. He played 8 seasons mainly as their starting nose tackle, left defensive tackle. And when he was there, they won 2 rings. He was never a all-star. He was never their best player on defense. He was more of like kind of like that low-level starter. But you really can't complain, right? I mean, he was a 4th-round pick, helped the team win 2 rings, so he got an A rating from me. Next episode here was another draft where it was kind of meh, but there were really like 3 players here that really stood out. Grayson, left defensive end. He was our 1st-round pick that year. He actually played very well. He made Pro Bowl multiple times. After 3 seasons, we did trade him. As a reminder, at this point in the series, we had a very stacked defensive line. So we traded him to Philadelphia. He actually is still playing in the league. He has he no longer plays for Philadelphia. He now actually plays in Minnesota. But in Philadelphia, he has a number of their records for 2nd in hurries, 4th in sacks. So was he an A for us? No, but he was an A overall pick. Clayton Parker was a very good tight end for us, but we let him walk after his rookie deal because we didn't want to pay what he was asking for. He also went to Jacksonville and helped them win one of their rings. Then there was a bunch of horrible picks. Then Alexis Brady. If you've watched the series, you know I love Alexis Brady. I think that he is one of the best picks that I ever got late in the draft. He was our 6th-round pick. He played for us for 10.5 seasons. He has 2nd best pass defended rate in Denver history, which I just want to call out. That is exceptionally hard to do. Not the fact that he has 2nd overall. He has a 2nd overall on a percentage rating across 10.5 seasons. That is ridiculous because I don't know if you can hold that record with only like 1 season, but the fact that he held that high of a pass defended rate across 10.5 seasons is absolutely nuts. He's also 3rd all-time in Denver interceptions and 6th all-time in passes defended. In the final season that we played, he was cut mid-season and he went to Chicago for a game. He is still technically in the league when we wrapped up, but he probably will retire if I clicked end season on our final season there. A rating, absolutely love that player. Sebastian Burrows was another absolutely stellar pick. Again, mainly because he was a 7th-round pick. He really did play for us and played a very key role for us for 9 seasons. He's also still in the league, and he's playing for different teams as a backup. Next, so this is where we made the switch to Devin Holmberg. Devin Holmberg is a very, very good quarterback. I don't really even know what else to say besides that. The only thing that I'll say is that he has problems staying healthy. Out of his 10 seasons starting, he's only played 3 of those in full, which is a problem. That being said, he's a really good quarterback. So, that's all I'm going to say about Devin Holmberg. This same draft, we also drafted Rich Middleton, who was our starting right defensive end for a number of seasons. He was released after 8 seasons. He went on to play 1 year with Washington before retiring. keep going down the list here. We also drafted Myron Willis in the 4th round. He played a number of seasons at defensive end for us. He ended up going to Buffalo, and he's been there ever since. And he's overall played a number of good seasons for them. His best season ever was actually our final episode. The other name worth mentioning here is Courtney Brody here. Courtney Brody played 1 season for us as a starting inside linebacker. Around this time, we were stacked at linebacker, so we traded him after a good season. He went to play for New York, or I guess it's in New Jersey in this game, and played a number of really, really respectable seasons. So really can't complain there either. Next episode, we had a very, very bad draft. The only player that is really worth anything was Bo Jefferson. The issue with him is that he wanted a ton of money after 6 seasons. So we ended up sending him, and we released him. He was picked up by, I think AU was Austin. Again, cities or teams move in this game. So he was picked up by Austin, and he's still starting for them today. That being said, really a bad draft. I mean, this guy might even be considered a B. This could be considered an F rating. But, you know, we got what we got. Then, this one I want to touch on just for a minute. This was the draft that could have completely changed the trajectory of our team, and it just went horribly. As a reminder, we had 5 picks in the first 2 rounds. None of them were super high picks. Our first pick was 30th overall, but still, like, that's 4 picks between like 30 and 45. So we should have landed some good players here. Henry Jones never really made it as a wide receiver. He's still in the league, but he's mainly a wide receiver 3. Maurice Morton had a decent season or 2, but really never panned out as a full-time starter. Cooper is basically our tight end 2. He's never had a great season. He's never popped off. So he's basically our tight end 2. Ricky Kelly, horrible. Didn't amount to anything in the league. And we also had Craighead, who also really amounted to basically nothing. He's at least still in the league, but really never got out of that backup role. So you will probably not recognize, I think outside of Morton, you will probably not recognize a single name on this list. This was a draft that if we had nailed, let's just say even 2 of these picks, we probably would have won a bowl. But we didn't, so it is what it is. Next year, I'm going to start with the 2 bigger names here. Luther Hall, Ike Borders. Both still play for us. Both are extremely key on our defense. Luther Hall, he's played 7 seasons. 5 of them, he's had over 100 tackles. He's a absolute boss, right? A player that I would absolutely draft again. Absolute steal in the 3rd round. Ike Borders, really decent corner. He's been our main corner for 7 seasons. Nothing to complain about. Famatu, 13th overall pick. He's not a horrible player. that's the thing that makes this hard, right? He's absolutely not a 13th overall pick. He definitely has not lived up to that. He is a valuable wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. He's mainly filled in for us as our wide receiver 2. And the big thing that I think it's next season that we drafted Dabney. Fumatu and Dabney get along really well, which also adds to, okay, he's at least a decent pick. Normally, if you get somebody in like the top 20, they kind of come with like a personality, right? Like they expect to be wide receiver 1. They expect most targets. They expect to be targeted in the red zone. They expect starting time. Fumatu really isn't that, right? He's kind of settled into this wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 mode, and he's okay with it. So overall, I gave him a C. I think that there's an argument that considering he was 13th overall pick, you could give him a D, but I think C is a very fair spot for him. Next year. So this year, Everett Clancy is a very interesting player. So he basically didn't play at all his first 4 seasons. Then he came in his 5th season and absolutely killed it. Made first team on the Pro Bowl, and he's a very interesting prospect that we would theoretically be keeping our eye on. Artie Price kind of falls into the same situation as Fumatu. He is a very, very decent running back. I don't think he's worth the 20th overall that we spent on him, but in his 6th season so far, he's averaging 4th in yards per carry in Denver history, and he's overall a very, very solid, split back. Easiest way to word it. Okay, here is the season where we picked up Dabney. Now, Dabney, he is the player that I was hoping Fumatu was going to be, just being blunt. He was a 15th overall pick. And in his 5 seasons with us, I think one season he technically had 990 yards, but he's basically gone for 1,000 yards every single season. Not only that, he is also huge on our kickoffs. He already, in 5 seasons, has most kickoff yards and touchdowns in Denver history. So, Melvin Dabney, absolutely stellar pick. Would absolutely pick him again at 15th. The other big pick this year was Grayson Gaither. He has been our tight end 1 for the past 5 seasons, and he actually has stepped up and had a couple of really big receiving yards for us. So these 2 really revitalized our offense, and everybody besides them was kind of crap this season, but these 2 really, really have helped our team out tremendously. Here we have a number of players that we should touch on. So our secondary here was lacking. So we used 13th overall on Chris Good. He is, through 4 seasons, proving to be a very viable starting corner. Through 4 seasons, he has 10 interceptions and almost an 80% pass defendant rate, and he still plays for us. Drew Jefferson, really, how do I word this? I think Drew Jefferson could be a wide receiver 1 on a team with a really bad receiving core. For us, he kind of trades on and off with Fumatu, but through his time with us, he's proven to be a viable starting wide receiver. The pick that was kind of unexpected was this running back in Leroy Daniels, and I'll be honest, I don't even know how much I said his name throughout our series together, but Leroy Daniels is potentially the best running back we've drafted. Herb Carpenter had his pros, but I think Leroy Daniels is actually a better running back, and his stats show it. Through 4 seasons, he's at 35 rushing touchdowns. So very, very good running back. And then the other worthwhile mention here, this is when we got our next main fullback. So again, kind of a utility position, but a very good pickup in the 4th round for us. All right, next episode. Next episode, we also went cornerback. Alan Knight and Chris Good are kind of our 2 starting corners now, and I think overall have played very well for us. We also got Troy Alexander as our left tackle this episode. Troy Alexander is not proving to be a top 10 left tackle, but he's a very viable starting left tackle. And considering we got him in the 3rd round, I'm happy about it. We also picked up our new starting center in the 4th round, which is also a very good value pickup for the team. The next episode, now these are the final 2 episodes, so we don't have too many stats on these players yet. It looks like Ziegler, who's an inside linebacker, is going to end up being a very, very good player for us. So, we really don't have too much to go on yet, but his bars and stuff, I think that he's right now slated to be like in the 70s or 80s overall. So he should grow to be one of the best players on our team. That being said, he's really the only player that's probably worth mentioning in this list. And then our final season together, we really have no stats to go on for these guys, but it looks like all of the picks that we made, besides the 7th round pick, are really looking like they're going to develop into at least a potential starting role and being able to stay on the team. So let's look at the draft recap. Now, I think I changed one of our C's to a D, if I remember correctly, so I'll update those real quick. Overall, again, these ratings are just my opinion, so they don't have any real weight behind them. But overall, I would say that we had a couple better drafts than we had in the first season. When I say first season, I mean when we played as Jacksonville. I think that overall my drafting got a little bit better. The other thing that's interesting is the way that I kind of drafted positionally throughout the first 2 rounds. Both of our first round quarterbacks hit, at least to a certain extent. We spent 4 first round picks on wide receivers, and I would say 2 of them hit in Jalen and Dabney. We really did not use too many picks on our offensive line. Looking back, we had a very good offensive line for a long stretch, so I kind of understand why these are low. And then we did use a number across our defense. The one thing I will say is I think I should have used an additional 1 or 2 first round picks on defensive tackle or nose tackle. Our nose tackle situation, we always had a good nose tackle. We always had normally 2, I would say, on the roster that were above average. We never had that absolute stud there, though. So if we could have found that, I think that could have helped us out a little bit. But I like how this overall got split up. And then if we look at the second round was very even across the board. So again, overall, very, I don't know if happy is the right word, but I guess just I'm happy that I didn't oversell on a specific position. I guess that's the best way to put it. I don't remember exactly where I landed on this in the first time when we played as Jacksonville. I'm always somebody that goes a little bit tight end happy. So I think these are a little bit lower than when we played as Jacksonville, but I would honestly need to double check. So yeah. Final thing that I want to do. Top 10 draft picks. Now this is going to combine our 20 episodes as Jacksonville and our 20 episodes as Denver. So let's go through them one by one. And again, this is just my top 10. You're free to disagree with me. If you disagree and you feel strongly about a specific player, I would love to hear it in the comments. But again, this is just kind of me having fun with it. So, 10th overall, I have to give to Jacksonville's Britt Slagle. I don't even know if that's how you say it. I think it was the very first episode that I ever recorded a front office football, and I used 7th round pick on a kicker, and all of the kickers that we drafted for Denver were very meh. This kicker, worked out to be the best kicker I think I've ever had in the game. Even the hundreds of seasons I ran before ever recording. He finished as Jacksonville's best kicker of all time. He finished as probably a top 5 kicker in the league in general, in the history. So, he was. I kind of look at it okay, you use a 7th round draft pick on Justin Tucker, right? When the draft happens, people kind of are why the hell did you use a pick on a kicker? But this was such a good kicker that he deserves to be on this list. 9th overall. This is where I am currently putting Melvin Dabney. Melvin Dabney, in my opinion, is an absolute stud. And I think if we had drafted him 5 seasons before we did, I think that he could definitely be higher on this list. I'm just hesitant to put him higher on the list because he only has 5 seasons under his belt. If he blows his ACL next season and never plays again, then I don't even know if he would end up on this list. But I think based on everything that we've seen from him, he absolutely deserves to be on the list currently. And like I said, if he has another 5 seasons on pace with what he's been doing, he would probably end up in the top 5 of all time. Number 8, Luther Hall. I think Luther Hall is an absolutely great inside linebacker. He has started for us for 7 seasons, 5 seasons over 100 tackles. The other awesome part to this is that he was a 3rd round pick. So the fact that he's playing at that level as a 3rd round pick, absolutely steal of a pick, absolutely would pick him again. 7th overall, Alexis Brady. Alexis Brady kind of falls into that same category as Luther Hall, where as a 6th round pick, he's an absolute steal. I would pick Alexis Brady as a 3rd round pick and still be happy with the numbers that he put up for us. Honestly, I would probably pick him even as a 2nd round pick. He was never the tackling king, but his pass defense, absolutely stellar. And I've talked about him enough. You guys don't need to know it and have me repeat his stats again. 6th overall, this is where I am placing Devin Holmberg. I think Devin Holmberg, stat-wise, is a very, very good quarterback. I still question how good he is. And the reason I say that is because I feel like he has the best receiving core that any of our quarterbacks have had. So you would kind of expect him to be putting up good numbers. He's putting up good numbers. He's holding a number of Denver, overall rankings. So overall, I'm very happy with him. I think that he still has a solid 5 years in the league, that we're not going to see how those play out. If he ended up winning a ring, I think that he would easily be top 3 on this list. If he ends up, fading out after this, I think that he is very... I think that if he fades out with his current ratings, I think that he falls down to like 9th on this list. Then, if you watched my recap for season 1, you're going to notice that I have these in a little bit out of order. Now that I've looked at more players over more time, I think that they need to be resorted slightly. Darian Parrish was from our Jacksonville team. He was one of the best defensive ends that was ever drafted to one of our teams. After leaving Jacksonville, he went on and helped Carolina get a ring. So I think that it's just fair to say that he's probably the best defensive end that we've ever drafted. And if we had gotten him on our Denver team, who knows where our Denver team would have gone. Fourth overall, Bart Hines. Now, I know some people might disagree that I'm putting Bart Hines above Devin Holmberg, but here's the thing. Bart Hines made playoffs for us 4 out of 6 seasons. After leaving us, he won a Super Bowl, and 1 league MVP. I really think that, like, when you have a quarterback, even if they're like a, B quarterback, and they are able to take your team and get a ring, I think that puts them above a quarterback that is unable to help your team get there. Bart Hines, the stats that I prioritize in terms of like TD versus interception and things like that, he didn't fit into the mold that I particularly like. That being said, I don't think that you can say that he was a bad quarterback. I think that he's easily he's easily one of the best quarterbacks that we've ever drafted. If Holmberg falls off after this season, which we won't know, I'm just saying theoretically, if Holmberg fell off, I think Bart Hines is the better quarterback compared to Devin Holmberg. So that's that. Third overall, Donnie Pasco. Now, Donnie Pasco was just such a centerpiece to our Denver defense. He went to the Pro Bowl multiple times. He won Defensive Player of the Year. He was the centerpiece of our defense that we intentionally had to build around him for 11 seasons. Not only that, after playing for us for 11 seasons, he went to 2 other teams where he played as a full-time starter. He is easily one of the best defensive players we ever drafted. I don't know how much his personality and him conflicting with other players, I don't know how much that worked in our favor versus not. We'll never know. But it's easy enough to say that he is probably the best defensive player we've ever drafted. Second overall, Alex Baxter. And I'm going to be honest, I threw him all over the place. Alex Baxter was our starting quarterback when we left off with our Jacksonville team. He was starting quarterback for 8 seasons for us. He was first in completion percentage, third in passing completions, first in yards per pass attempt, first in yards per carry, and 10th in rushing yards. So not only was he an exceptionally good passing quarterback, he was also a running quarterback. right? He's almost like, I'm trying to think of even who to compare him to, because like I don't even feel like comparing him to like somebody like Lamar Jackson is even fair, because Alex Baxter was also a very, very good passing quarterback. I think the problem with Alex Baxter is that he really never got that receiving core that we ended up getting in Denver. Now, going back to what I was saying earlier about Bart Hines, Alex Baxter really never did too much in terms of like playoffs. He never won a ring. So you might be asking, why is he second on the list? Alex Baxter still should have had probably at least 5 seasons as a viable starting quarterback. If Jacksonville surrounded him with very good players, like, a viable wide receiver 1, viable tight end 1, things like that, I think Alex Baxter has the stats, has the bars that he could easily win a ring. It's not something that we saw happen, but I think that he's worth where he's currently rated. Similar to what I said with Devin Holmberg, though, if Alex Baxter continued at the level of play that he was playing at, I think that he's fine where he's at, especially if he won a ring. If he fell off after that 8th season, he could probably drop to where Devin Holmberg is now. Now you might be wondering, those are the 3 main quarterbacks that we played with, right? Through Jacksonville, through Denver. Those were our 3 main quarterbacks that actually played decently. Who is the top player? And you're more than free to disagree with me, but now that I've played another round of this, I put number 1 overall player, Watanabe. If you didn't watch season 1, Watanabe was our starting tight end for 12 seasons, basically, with Jacksonville. He was exceptionally reliable. He was exceptionally good. He holds multiple Jacksonville top 5 records. The thing that's crazy is, like, I think his name's Grayson, is the tight end that was rated like in the 70s on our Denver team. He had like an 800-yard season, but then he was like all over the place. Watanabe, through 12 seasons, never dropped below 350 yards in a season. And over half of his seasons, he received over 600 receiving yards. Like, that type of consistency, that type of drive, all of that, I think I would be hard-pressed to ever draft a tight end that plays as well as Watanabe does. Like, if we run another episode or another season of this as another team, I honestly do not believe that we will ever see a player put up the stats that Watanabe did. He's an absolute monster. So yeah, that is the top 10 draft picks from our 2 seasons. Again, I would love to know your input. This is just me putting together a list. No science went into this, no calculations, just kind of which players I felt fit in where, and kind of how they played for us. So, if you watched the recap, thank you guys so much. If you want Front Office Football 8 to remain on the channel, let me know in the comments. Again, it's a game that I love, so regardless, I think there's a decent shot that it comes back to the channel, but we'll see how it all goes. Thank you guys for sticking it out with me. Thank you for playing through another season with me. And until next time, AyyScare out.